It's Reality Check with Craig Price.
I'm an idiot.
4 minutes in and I'm already wrong.
I'm like a monkey. Hello, look at me. Hey, I need you guys to do these things.
This whole show is a tangent.
Cool. That's why I dig it.
Shazam! It's Reality Check with Craig Price. This week, Brad Montgomery is here to talk happiness. Welcome to the podcast. I appreciate you taking time to listen. I also want to thank everyone for their comments and sharing of last week's non-episode about Robin Williams. You know, I felt I needed to say some things and get them out into the world, and your responses to me personally have been very sweet, and I certainly appreciate it. And some of you had a bit more concern in your voice, but I'm fine. The podcast helped me work through a little bit, and that brings me to today's guest. It's by pure coincidence that after last week, my guest Brad is here to talk happiness. I've known Brad not really well, but certainly more than just passing acquaintances for a few years. And when I saw him after he was presented his CPAE in San Diego this past July, we talked about having him coming on the podcast, you know. And a CPAE is basically the Hall of Fame for speakers, so it was nice to see him receive that. It was well earned, and he really is one of the most upbeat, positive folks you can meet. And if it wasn't tempered by his offbeat humor, it would be downright annoying. But he's really one of the few super positive speakers I can relate to. I really like him. He's a really nice guy. And, you know, happiness is like the holy grail for most of us. It's something that is constantly pursued and yet not always obtainable. But I think if you're actively trying to do things and share things with others to make them happy, you're doing it right, even if you're not euphoric every second, which, let's be honest, if no one wants to be around that guy. You know, we like to see some people who actually have a range of emotions. So let's get a positive, realistic view of happiness with this week's guest, Brad Montgomery. So in the movie The Matrix, Agent Smith, the bad guy, he tells Neo, the good guy, Keanu Reeves, that they really built two matrices, I don't know what they're called, but they're multiple matrices. Their first attempt at the Matrix, they made everybody happy. They made everybody's life happy and content and wonderful, and it was a huge failure because this program was saying that the human brain can't accept too much happiness. And so they had to, you know, reduce the amount of happiness in the Matrix so that the human beings would accept it and not reject it. So what do you feel about the capacity of the human condition as us as humans to be happy in general?
I love that. And by the way, I think it's Matrix I.
I think it's Matrix.
Well, I think there's two things to say. One, our capacity to be happy is greater than we think. So whatever you think for yourself, whatever we think for ourselves, my first thought would be we can be happier than your first blush. But the second thing is to remind ourselves that we're still human, and that still means life is still going to occasionally suck. So that means if we study happiness, we're not necessarily erasing all of the misery. We're just making ourselves more capable of dealing better with some difficult times. So I don't know what the magic answer was on the happiness scale. You can be at 11. I'm just saying I haven't met a single person who has reached their maximum, and I have met people who falsely think I can erase misery, I can erase pain, and I can just float around like lollipops and unicorns and rainbows. It's not that way.
A lot of people are in denial, or it's one of these situations where I feel people are shamed publicly about not being happy enough. So you have to be happy, or there's a guilt factor, especially in business. If you're not super positive, you're not a team player. If you're not wonderful and happy all the time, then there's something wrong with you. And you talk about that, happiness is something that you can actually affect. It is something that you can change and control to some degree.
Yeah, and that was kind of news to me, because I thought, and I think most of us thought or think, that we're more or less born, Craig, with what we got. And, how many people, times have we heard, well, I'm just kind of a downer, or I'm a little negative, or, I know people that, one guy describes himself as a crotchety old man, and he thinks that's hilarious. But in fact, he's an idiot, because we can. It's proven with science. It's not just me saying it. There's all kinds of really credible science saying we can make ourselves happier through strategic thought, which sounds like it's so boring, and strategic planning, which sounds very ironic when you're talking about happiness. But by trying on purpose, we can make ourselves happier.
I was waiting for you to use the word algorithm of some sort, and then that'd be the trifecta of boring. Throw some algebra and some calculus in there as well. That will really make you happy.
Well, the irony is that, study happiness. There's a lot out there on happiness, and some of it is fluffy crap, honestly. But there's a lot of really great academic writing about happiness and how we can use it, and how we can be more happy, and why it's relevant. And what's remarkable to me is how much of it is just painfully boring. How reading about happiness seems to create a little bit of unhappiness in us because it's dull. But, that's my job. Our job, I think, is as communicators is to help simplify it.
And my guest today is Brad Montgomery. And some of you may think, Craig, why are you having this positive happiness guy on? He must be your arch nemesis as a negativity speaker. And in fact, you are not. We get along quite well. And it's one of those things where, there are people who think that, happiness is an absolute, and it has no place sitting next to or alongside of negative thinking or critical thinking at all. Like if you're a negative person, like I'm a negative person, I honestly admit that, but then people are always surprised that I'm not miserable. And it's because I don't think things are going to, I don't think things are going to fail and be miserable. I just think that nothing is going to be easy and nothing is going to be smooth. So how can you?
But is that what you mean by I'm a negative person? I would just call maybe you're a realist.
Yeah. Well, see, that's the thing. I always find that funny is that when people say, well, no, I'm not a positive person, but I am a realist. So what you're saying is I'm not a negative person, I'm a realist, but is a realist positive? Oh, no. So what you're saying is the opposite of positive is a realist, but instead of using negative, they use realist. It's all semantics. It's all turn of phrase. I use negativity because I'm not afraid to tiptoe around the word. I go out of my way to look for problems when I'm doing something, so I avoid them, so I know what to look for. It's like when you're driving. Yeah. When I'm driving, I look ahead to see if there are potholes. I don't just, look around the environment and enjoy the trip. I do that as well when I can, but I also want to make sure that, I don't go off the edge. I know my GPS may send me into a lake if I just think it's going to be all good. So I that's how I see it. And I think I would say it's a pretty even split that there are happy people who see things, half full, whatever you want to say, and then there's people who see it half empty. It's just it's a perspective, but that doesn't mean happiness is out of the equation.
Yeah, I want to. So it's your podcast, but how about if I ask you a question? Given your metaphor about driving and looking for potholes, how do you feel about The Secret? And if you kind of put out the being open to success and open to whatever, this will happen for you. What's your take on that as a realist, negative, whatever you are?
Yeah. Seeker? That's fine. Well, The Secret, as a whole, as a product, is it's all marketing. They took a concept, the law of attraction, which has pieces that are relevant. If you are open to new ideas, the law of attraction, if you're open to new ideas, then you're going to probably have more success because you'll have more opportunities because you can identify them. But they took that little piece, which is a truth. If you're open to new things, you'll have more opportunities to potentially be happy or get what you want. So it's really it's a numbers game. The more chances you have, the more likely you're going to win. But then they took that and they said all you have to do is think that way. They took the action out of attraction. And, and they have people looking at windows and closing their eyes. And next thing you know, I hope I get that necklace and it just magically appears and things like that. Even Oprah backed away from The Secret to some degree because people with breast cancer were going, Oprah, I saw your special about The Secret and I'm not going to chemo. I'm just going to have a positive attitude. Well, no, don't do that. We want you to have a positive attitude and do things. So that's where, when it comes to The Secret, I think it's really more of a marketing ploy. I'm not against the law of attraction per se. I just think they're using it incorrectly, or you taking the most fanciful, easy parts of it and using that to sell.
Well, right on, brother. So to me, this is a fascinating conversation because I would describe myself as a super positive person. You're describing yourself as a negative person. We couldn't agree more on the secret. I think it's crap because you're right. There's parts of it that are very interesting and important. Being open to success, being open to whatever. But you're right. There's just no follow-up. Like being open to it is the start, and then like maybe a to-do list is going to help. Maybe some support. Maybe a little education or research. Maybe chemo. So it's funny because we describe ourselves as separate, but I'm telling you, we're right on.
Well, it's all about perspective. It's how it's not necessarily admitting one fact is mine and one fact is yours. It's looking at a fact and looking at it in two different ways. So we see the fact that you have to do something besides just wish, and you're applying your perspective, which is a positive one, and mine's much more practical, realistic. You're gonna have to do a little bit more work than they're talking about, kind of way. So it's really perspective versus you own your set of facts and I have my set of facts when it comes to positive and negative.
Well, this is right. This right here is going to make you love happiness because I used to be, for a living, I used to go out and talk about, hey, use humor in the workplace, smile more, try to have fun. And then when I started to reading about happiness, I realized that everything I was saying was similar to The Secret and that it was kind of crap. It was, this is not helpful. So I think you and I are both going to like this happiness thing because it's based in science, it's proven, it's not all fuzzy and soft. There's actually some hard science to it. And, and there's also that action step that's missing that I think both of us would criticize a lot of, whatever motivational techniques or whatever. This one works because it requires you to work.
And I think it's when it comes to perspective, especially with a positive, negative perspective, which, like I said, I believe happiness is part of everybody's life, regardless of how you think of things. I mean, I'm a pretty happy guy. There's not much I can complain about. I've got a great wife, and we travel a lot, and I get to go to events and see people like yourself, and meet good, fun speaker folks, and travel the country. So I don't really have much to complain about. But I also know that when I get ready to go on that plane, on that trip with my wife, it's what am I forgetting? What do I need to do? Where are the obstacles? What are the problems where other people are going, oh, it's going to be a great trip. Let's focus on that. And I will do that when I'm there because I think it's really an intent versus results. I think positive people, they're looking at what the intent is. We're going to have a great time. This is what we're intending to do. And negative folks are happy when things are done, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's interesting.
What do you think about that? Since you're the happiness guy.
Honestly, I think you're missing part of it because
that's fine.
How's that for a crappy guest? I'm calling you on it.
That's fine.
Well, the problem, as I see that, is if to use I don't know if it's a metaphor or a fact, but if you're only going to be happy once you get to your destination, that means the travel itself is crappy because you're focused on what could happen and what could go wrong. What I would say for myself and for anyone who cares to listen is that, yeah, we need to listen to Craig and think ahead, like what could go wrong and plan ahead and be prepared. So what are you going to do? You're going to take a little extra cash and you're going to take a snack and an extra water bottle or whatever it is. But then you do your best to enjoy that trip. Because if you're spending a day or, sometimes our 2-hour trip turns into an 8-hour trip or whatever, you might as well do your best to make sure that doesn't suck. So
and that's how I do it.
Make sure that's fun.
Well, that's what I do is I don't take it as the trip. I break it up into pieces. Like, I've got to get to the airport. So what other problems are going to get me to the airport? So once I get to the airport, oh, thank God I'm at the airport. I'm early. I've got plenty of time. Let's go to Starbucks and have a coffee and relax. And we're here early, so I don't have to worry about, us being late to the plane. Now I just have to worry, which I have no control over. I don't worry about things I have no control over. But now I don't have to worry about being at the airport. But then as soon as we get on the ground at our destination, there's that small period of now we got to get to the hotel. So then where's the baggages? We got to get things going. Boom, boom, boom. And then once we get to the hotel, oh, this is a lovely place. Look how nice this is. So it's really about I don't take it in that big of a chunk because that's daunting. Our entire trip has to be successful. No, let's leave early so we can get to the airport on time so I can relax, so I don't have to worry so much, and take it in smaller chunks.
Well, I think we're in agreement. So it turns out I can't call you on it, but definitely it seems like there's two kinds of people: the people who at least let's keep with travel. There's people who are like, okay, what are all the things that are going to go wrong? Or you just go and say, whatever goes wrong, I'm totally capable of handling it. And I will do what I can, given my experience and my intellect and my education, to minimize anything going wrong. But in the end, I know what'll happen. Some things will happen, and I'll be well prepared to deal with it. Now let's try to make the best of it. And I think that applies to life.
Yeah. Where do you fit in with the people that try to tell everybody to kind of basically what they're saying is you need to suppress any negative or unhappy feelings you have and cover that up with happiness, fake it till you make it kind of situation? Because there's proof in science that does not work. The fake it till you make it won't, because your brain knows when you're lying to yourself.
Yeah, I think it's crap to not admit when you're sad. So, I mean, like, if you lose a spouse or a dog, or you break your arm, or you lose the use of your legs or whatever, you just have to be an idiot to say, oh, I'm not sad. I'll be happy. And I don't know how you can do that. That's not what I'm a proponent of. What I'm trying to say is, generally speaking, your overall quality of life, your wellness of being, includes some huge peaks, hopefully, that where you're ecstatic and very happy. But unfortunately, it'll have some valleys too, because we're human. And I would even suggest that if we don't have some valleys, if we're not unhappy sometimes, we can't be happy. The flat line is not helpful either. So, yeah, we do have sadness, but we're trying. What I'm trying to do is think in a way, to live in a way, and teach in a way that when people are in those dark moments where you feel like, yeah, this blows, there's no doubt about it. What can I do to move forward, given the fact that I know this blows and I want it to blow less? I want to move forward. How can I best deal with this in a way that gets me to a peak in a reasonable amount of time?
Well, let's talk about that, because I think, for me, most of the unhappiness, which it really is not, it's for this conversation, that's what I'll label it. It's really not as severe as that. It comes in my business, because I think it's always been weird that way. My life has always been, when my personal life is going great, business is kind of weird, and when my business is going great, it was probably because I didn't have much of a social life or a home life, so I didn't have to worry about it. You know what I mean? Like, for me, the constant struggle to balance it, which is impossible, which is why I've kind of stopped. I can get people, in a situation where they are now focusing on work as a place where they're unhappy. But how can they become more happy at work? What are some of the ways that we can take these things? Because I think that's where most people are unhappy. I admit we all have our ups and downs in our regular lives, but with work, I think that really causes most people their unhappiness.
Yeah, I love this question. So, you know that I'm a speaker, and I used to go out there and tell people to try to enjoy work. But what killed me about my own stuff was telling people who have, like they work in a crappy cubicle, they have a bad boss, they have a worse supervisor, they're doing something they hate. And then I'm coming in from the outside going, hey, good, enjoy work. And so that disconnect was really strong. So I love that question. How can we be happier? Here's the first thing that's been helpful for me, and I think it could be helpful for all of us, which is knowing that the condition or life circumstances affect our happiness much less than we would predict. And let me explain. So, like, if you ask people what makes them happy or unhappy, it's just like what you said. Well, my job is a big source of unhappiness. Whether or not I'm married, like I have a great wife or a crappy wife. Great husband, crappy husband. Whether or not I have a pet, whether or not I have health. These are like, even these huge things, whether or not I have a lot of dough. All of these things are still grouped by scientists in kind of our life circumstances. And it turns out our life circumstances do affect our happiness, but not nearly as much as we think. And that is like mind-blowing. So let me give you a couple examples. So the base point here, Craig, is that we're all more resilient than we would predict. So the scientists call it hedonistic adaptation, which just means something good happens, something bad happens, we kind of get over it quicker than we think. For example,
I'm glad you explained that, because I thought we were getting to some 50 Shades of Grey area for a second.
I wish we were.
We just learned something about Brad, I think.
Yeah. But check out the lottery winners. It seems like we always love to see. I do. I love to see like Fox TV specials on lottery winners that have lost everything. But the fact is, and there's been all kinds of studies on this, people who win the lottery, the big jackpots, they are thrilled. Of course, their happiness goes up. But over time, it doesn't change their happiness more than just a little smidge. And the same thing is true with the opposite. When we study people that have gone through tragedy, so oddly, Craig, there's a ridiculous amount of studies about the happiness and well-being of people who have lost use of their legs. So of course they're miserable, right? They're sad. They're not happy. But that adaptation is equally true. That over time they're ridiculously resilient, and that condition affects their happiness just a tiny smidge. Meaning, even big things, these big things that are part of our life circumstances really don't make up our happiness nearly as much as we think. What's really huge is two things. Our genetics, okay, we can't control that. But then the last thing is what we do and how we think, which we can control. What we do and how we think turns out has a much greater impact on our life than our life circumstances. So now back to your question. What about if my job sucks? To me, the first thing that helps is if our job sucks is to remind me that, what I think and how I act has a much greater impact than the fact that I have a crappy boss, that I'm stressed out because they changed the software at work, because I hate my supervisor, because my workmate is a putz. It turns out all those things can and do affect our happiness, but not nearly as much as the things that I can control. So when I read that, Craig, and found out that it wasn't just some quack, I mean, there's like unbelievably strong, incredible evidence out there that this is true. That just changed everything for me. Because that means, yeah, there are difficulties. If your job sucks, it sucks. But what we do and what we think actually can have a much greater impact than whether or not our boss is good, or whether or not our, the task we're doing today is good, or whether or not our computer blows up.
So how do we get out of that pattern? Because if you've been at a job for, let's say, 6 years, and over time, you've gotten to not like it as much as your first day. And that's inevitable because of complacency and familiarity. You just kind of get bored with it. And bored is not a positive or negative thing. It's just it's an indifferent.
Sure.
But at some point you start seeing issues and you start identifying problems. You get in a pattern of identifying, my boss is an idiot. He's causing all these problems, blah, blah, blah. Now I'm unhappy with work. What can we do to shift that? Because you're dealing with a long period of time and a pattern. How do you break the pattern? Because it's not as easy as just going, hey, think of things this way. Because people can't just flip a switch. Yeah.
Well, yeah, that's a great question. And I'm just kissing. It's not really a good question. I'm just kissing up because it's your podcast.
Well, and also that's always a good way to stall.
Well, so what do we do? The first step sounds kind of stupid, so stick with me. But the first one is to just decide you want to do something about it, which sounds, like I said, sounds kind of fluffy. But I can't tell you how many people talk to me and say, Brad, I'd really like to change things, but they don't really want to put in the effort. Because I think it's important to understand that what I'm saying is not like an attitude you just adopt one day. It's more like a skill, like learning to play piano or guitar, or learning how to ride a unicycle. It's possible. You can do it. It just takes work. And are you willing to invest that time? And are you really ready to make it happen? Because I'm with you. We all get in ruts. Like 6 years, you kind of adapt or adopt to the crappy boss. And, okay, I guess this is my future. And I have 9 years left to retirement or whatever. And we, through momentum and like habit, we just sort of fall into it. So it sounds stupid, but it's actually a pretty big step to say, okay, darn it, this does suck, and I'm willing to make changes. So how's that for something crazy? You really have to decide, all right, I want to do it, and I'm willing to work at it.
Well, we'll put it in the analogy of a diet. I think people will say, you know what, I need to go on a diet. It's time to go on a diet. There's obvious reasons why. I'm overweight. I want to maintain my health. So I have all these reasons why I should diet. Now it's time to go on the diet, and it's not as easy as just going, hey, I'm going to go on a diet. So are there some things that we can think about as we're making this, as you say, as a skill, as we're learning this skill? Because you're not going to hit a home run the first time you swing a bat.
Yeah, so there's so many things, but let me see if I can just give you a few small ones. I love your let's go backwards in time to the travel analogy, and you were talking about, well, I break up my trip across the country into tiny little steps.
Yeah, I break up my misery into chunks.
Well, let's break up your job misery into chunks too. So this means instead of trying to say, how can I be so happy that I come home and I dance and pirouette when I walk in the door? No, instead we're going to say, like, how can we make this 15 minutes a little bit less sucky? How can we make that meeting I have to do a little bit less sucky? How can we make this conference call a little bit less crappy? And then so you're taking little chunks, and I call it the theory of small wins. You're just looking for tiny little things that can make you say, woohoo, that is working for me. So you focus on little tiny things. So for example, here's something I tell people. You want to sort of give people the benefit of the doubt. Let me give you an example. You're driving to work, and you go, I hate this because there's so much traffic. I drive in this traffic every single morning. I hate my life. And then someone cuts you off. They pull in front of you. It's dangerous, and you want to honk at them and flip them off. Well, that's human, right? That's me. But instead of doing that, try this. Give that person the benefit of the doubt and just make up a story in your head. Oh, maybe that person is late to the hospital, or they just found out that their son their life is in jeopardy, and they're doing their best to get to that hospital immediately. Well, that kind of, I don't know if it's true or not, but the cool thing is it doesn't matter if it's true. Once you start releasing that, saying, all right, I'm going to do that, it can start lifting the burden. So this is true with, that idiot on the conference call or whoever's at work with you. Give them the benefit of the doubt, and you start playing games with yourself, going, all right, let's pretend that person had a really bad day today, and hasn't had sex in 9 months, and is miserable, and their high school aged daughter yelled at them today, and suddenly it makes things better. So notice what I did, Craig. We're talking tiny micro moments even. We're not talking about making your day better. We're trying to say, I'm taking these moments at a time, because science proves that once we start doing that, it becomes, you can create a little momentum, and it creates a trend, and slowly and surely you can raise your level of, I call it big happy, but that means you're like quality of life, wellness. Those little tiny moments actually make a difference.
And I think that's where people get in the most trouble is they try to take a -9 experience, we'll get into math, a -9 experience and make it a +9 experience. Well, that's an absolute of 18. That's a long way to go. When you can try to make a -9 experience into a -8 experience, then that can become a -7 and incrementally get to 18. I think people just try to swing that pendulum too far too quickly.
Oh, that's a wicked, I love that analogy.
You can have that.
Okay, let me write it down. But that's exactly right. That's asking for too much. That's like saying I'm going to lose 180 pounds this month. That's not good. What is good is to say I will lose a half a pound this week and keep it off, because that's doable and it's possible and it's in the right direction. And if you keep doing that, you're going exactly to where you want. And if you take those little baby steps, you can go a long way.
Now, in all of your research and your experience with groups, and because you talk to groups all around the country, and is there one common thing that you consistently see as like the number one cause of unhappiness that people could easily change?
Yeah. I have to oversimplify it a little bit, though. The main thing is to get people to take responsibility for their own happiness. Because I'm telling you, science backs it up. You have way more control, Craig, of your own happiness than I do of your happiness. So, you got to take control and say, all right, fine, I guess I'll do it then. So what I see all around the country and with all my groups is people waiting for something to happen. Oh, I'll be happy if my boss quits, or if this happens, or when that project happens, or when we just got acquired by a different company. Once we get, all settled in, then I'll be happy. No, what really works better is to get people to say, all right, damn it, I'm in charge. I will take responsibility for my own happiness, and I'll do my best, regardless of what's happening. And that's when people start making strides, as opposed to waiting around for something to happen. Waiting around for something to happen, one, doesn't work, and two, is distracting, because while you're waiting for something to happen, you're not moving forward.
And you have no control of that timetable. You're just
Yeah,
waiting. You're just hoping and waiting, and that's even more frustrating. I think the fact that if you sit back and wait for things to get better, that will actually cause you more anxiety because you feel even more helpless because you're not doing anything.
I think that's exactly right. You feel helpless, and then in the end, you're disappointed. Because like once that thing happens, let's say once we get that new software integrated, I can't tell you how many of my clients, Greg, call and say our people are stressed out because we're switching software platforms. Well, the sad thing is you go and talk to these people and they're just so tense and uptight. Once they get the new software, guess what? They'll adapt and it'll be over, and then they'll be up with some other problem. Nothing changes. That theory that if this happens, then we will be happy never works. What does work is to say, all right, fine. If I can make myself happy, how do we do that? Let's get started now, in spite of all this other crap. This other stuff just it's not as important as you think. If winning the lottery doesn't change your happiness over the long term, then, getting migrated to the next system or, learning about your new boss or waiting till your team does this, that definitely is not going to have a long-term effect on your happiness.
Well, I would certainly like to try first and see if that's true. So, I always love it how the people who have the money are always going, money doesn't solve problems. And it's like, well, I'd like to find out that on my own first.
Yeah,
a little firsthand experience. But one of the things that you do talk about and that I've heard you repeat a couple times is that you feel that being happy is a duty. It's something that it's not just something that is passive. You have to be active, and it's something that you feel that you have to do as part of your obligation.
Yeah, I love that topic. But you're only partly right. What I'd really say is that not just being happy is a duty, although I would say for those people we live with, they sure would appreciate it if we would at least be on the journey of happiness. But what I would say is a duty is leading with happiness, meaning I need to interact with you in a really positive way. That I don't. Not only is it kind of a bummer if I'm a downer when I'm around you and I'm icky and I'm unpleasant. I'm saying it's my job to be the opposite. I need to build you up. I need to build everyone up. If it's the barista at Starbucks or the guy who's cleaning in the bathroom in the airport or my clients or my family, it's not just sort of a kind of a good idea if maybe I'm upbeat and fun and help them thrive. It's my freaking duty. And I would say that some people, it's not their duty, and they, there's some people that are dealing with health issues, or they, it's like the guy with 3 jobs and the single mom with 2 jobs or whatever. They're probably overwhelmed, and we can give them a pass. But most of us who have, the major stresses in our life are taken care of. I think for the rest of us, it's our duty. And that was a new thought for me when I came up on that. That was big.
And it doesn't really take that much. It's really, saying thank you to the barista who doesn't ever hear thank you, and all they hear is the screaming and yelling when their coffee's flat or not warm or wrong, or they didn't put a Splenda in instead of the sweet and low. It's simple things like saying thank you, or I appreciate what you did. I think a lot of people think they have to be these big grand gestures when they really just have to be common courtesy, which I don't see a lot of anymore.
Well, so one of the women in my audience came up to me last week and told me the coolest story. She said she has a game with herself. And by the way, that's another way to say this is a technique. For her, this is a technique. She called it a game, but you asked me how do you be happy, here's one. She finds the people who she feels like need it most, and she interacts with them in a human way. And in particular, these are the people cleaning the airport bathrooms. So she said she went out of her way to find this woman in the bathroom and said, I guess she just said like a greetings, looked her in the eye and asked her how she was or whatever. And the woman stopped her. So I guess she went and did her business. And on the way out, a woman stopped her and said, "You're the first person who's ever talked to me that way." And the woman I was talking to she got all teary-eyed. So, I mean, like, that makes me feel horrible because I need to be doing more of that. But all of us do. Like, it's not just a good idea to seek those people out. It's not just selfish because it makes us happier, which it does. It's our duty. Like, for crying out loud, of course we should be doing that.
Well, Brad, we're just touching the surface. There's so much more to this. Where can people find you? Because I know you speak all over the country. You are a CPAE, which, for those of you who don't know, is a Hall of Fame speaker. And deservedly so.
Let me take my crown off.
Yeah, and deservedly so. You're fantastic, and you're extremely funny and very engaging. And so where can people find you if they wanted to, have you come talk to their association or learn more about, happiness in the workplace?
Dude, you're a rock star. My name's Brad Montgomery, and that's my website, bradmontgomery.com. But I'm so flattered to be part of it, and it's fun to be in a more relaxed setting. Of course, when I'm speaking, because there's so many people there, it has to be more formal. But it's really fun to be able to talk to you about travel and then connect it to deep thoughts. So you rock on, dude.
And you get to tell me I'm wrong. So that's you don't usually get to do that too often.
Yeah, but in the end, it turns out we agree. So I was wrong.
Well, one thing, I'm happier just talking to you. So I think we've accomplished mission accomplished for you there, Brad.
Check one off. Check duty done.
That's the show. Thanks to Brad for coming on. You can check out the first chapter of his book on humor if you download the app on iTunes, Google Play, or Amazon. We're at Reality Check Pod on Twitter, realitycheckpodcast.com to sign up for the newsletter, or email Craig at Speaker Craig Price with guest suggestions, comments, or questions. See you next week.
I know this blows, and I want it to blow less.